My cousin's fiancé is cheating with 3 different women in our wedding party. I never thought I would be the one to destroy a wedding. Especially not my cousin Sarah's dream destination wedding in Tuscany. But sometimes being the good guy means doing the hardest thing imaginable. Let me back up and explain how I ended up in this nightmare situation. My name is Mike, and Sarah has been like a sister to me since we were kids. Our families are tight. You know how Italian families are. Sunday dinners at Nonna's house. Everyone in each other's business, but in a loving way. When Sarah got engaged to Derek 2 years ago, I was genuinely happy for her. Derek seemed perfect on paper. Pharmaceutical sales rep, great income, charming personality that could win over anyone in the room. My whole family adored him. Uncle Tony would slap Derek on the back and tell stories about how impressed he was with this guy who was going to take care of his little girl. Derek would bring expensive wine to family dinners, remember everyone's birthdays, and he had this way of making Sarah light up whenever he walked into a room. I was honored when they asked me to be the best man. Sarah and I had been through everything together, from scraped knees as kids to helping each other through college finals. She deserved the fairy tale wedding she had always dreamed about. The wedding planning started 18 months ago. Sarah quit her job as a graphic designer to focus full-time on planning this elaborate celebration in Tuscany and preparing for their move to Seattle, where Derek got a big promotion. The whole thing was going to cost around $150,000. Money that both families had saved for years to make Sarah's dreams come true. The guest list was 40 people, all flying to Italy for a week-long celebration. The wedding party included Sarah's best friend Jessica as maid of honor, my girlfriend Amanda as a bridesmaid along with Derek's sister Kelly, and me as best man with Derek's brother and another college friend as groomsman. They even hired this high-end wedding planner named Victoria who specialized in destination weddings and came highly recommended. Everything seemed perfect until about 2 months ago when I started noticing things. It began with Derek's travel schedule. He had always traveled for work, but suddenly he was gone almost every weekend. Business trips to cities that seemed random, staying extra days for what he called client meetings. Sarah would mention how disappointed she was that Derek missed another family dinner or couldn't help with wedding planning, but she always made excuses for him. Then there was his behavior with the women in the wedding party. Derek had always been friendly, but I started noticing how he would find reasons to text Jessica about wedding details that should have gone through Sarah. He would offer to drive Amanda to wedding-related appointments when I was working. He volunteered to have private meetings with Victoria to discuss surprise elements for Sarah that he wanted to keep secret. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. Derek was just being helpful, right? But something in my gut told me to pay attention. The first real red flag came 6 weeks before the wedding during a tasting appointment at a local restaurant that was catering the rehearsal dinner. Derek showed up late, claiming his flight had been delayed, but when I hugged him hello, his cologne was different, and there was a faint smell of perfume on his jacket. Sarah was so stressed about the menu decisions that she didn't notice, but I filed it away in my mind. 2 days later, Amanda mentioned something strange. She said Derek had texted her asking if she wanted to grab coffee to discuss surprise bachelor and bachelorette party coordination. She found it odd because typically the maid of honor would handle that communication. When I asked Derek about it directly, he laughed it off and said he just wanted to make sure all the details were perfect for Sarah. That same week, I was at Derek's apartment helping him organize wedding gifts when his phone kept buzzing with text messages. He was in the bathroom and the phone was sitting right there on the coffee table. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I glanced at the screen. There were several messages from Jessica with heart emojis and one that said, "Miss you already." My stomach dropped. Jessica had been engaged to her boyfriend Tom for 3 years. They were planning their own wedding for next summer. Why would she be sending messages like that to Derek? I decided I needed to investigate without jumping to conclusions. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe they were planning something special for Sarah and I was misreading the situation. Over the next week, I started paying closer attention to everyone's behavior. Jessica seemed different around Derek, more animated and giggly than usual. She would find excuses to touch his arm or stand close to him during group conversations. When Sarah wasn't looking, I caught them exchanging meaningful glances across the room. Amanda was acting strange too. She had become secretive about her phone and would leave the room to take certain calls. When I asked her about it, she said it was just wedding stress, and Sarah had her on edge about all the details needing to be perfect. Victoria, the wedding planner, started showing up to family meetings with a glow about her that seemed suspicious. She was a professional who usually maintained appropriate boundaries, but suddenly she was laughing too hard at Derek's jokes and offering to handle tasks that should have involved Sarah's input. 3 weeks before the wedding, everything came crashing down. Derek was supposed to be in Chicago for a pharmaceutical conference, but I was downtown running errands when I saw him walking into an expensive hotel with Jessica. They were holding hands and she was carrying an overnight bag. My heart started pounding as I watched them through the lobby windows. Derek pulled Jessica close and kissed her in a way that definitely wasn't appropriate for a future brother-in-law. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to process what I had just witnessed. Part of me wanted to storm into that hotel and confront them immediately, but I realized I needed more information before I destroyed my cousin's life. I spent the next few days in agony, trying to act normal around Sarah while my mind raced with what to do. She was so excited about the final wedding preparations, talking about how lucky she was to have found Derek and how perfect their life together was going to be. Then, Derek made a mistake that changed everything. He left his laptop open at his apartment when Sarah and I came by to pick up some wedding favors. Sarah went to use the bathroom and Derek stepped outside to take a business call. His email was open on the screen and I could see a message thread that made my blood run cold. The subject line was Bachelor Party Scorecard, and it was a group chat with 5 of Derek's college buddies. I only had time to read a few messages before I heard footsteps, but what I saw made me physically sick. Derek had been rating the women in our wedding party like they were some kind of game. Jessica was listed as conquered, with a difficulty rating of 8 out of 10. Amanda was listed as in progress, with notes about her emotional vulnerabilities. Victoria was marked as easy target, with details about how impressed she was with his wealth and status. But the worst part was seeing Sarah's name at the bottom of the list with the notation, wife material. Boring, good for cover. I quickly closed the laptop and tried to act normal when Derek and Sarah came back into the room. But inside I was falling apart. This man wasn't just cheating on my cousin, he was treating her and the other women like objects in some sick competition with his friends. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Sarah's face when she talked about Derek, how she had reorganized her entire life around him, how both our families had spent their savings on this wedding. But I also thought about Jessica, Amanda, and Victoria, who were all being manipulated by someone they trusted. I knew I had to do something, but I also knew that simply telling Sarah might not be enough. Derek was charming and manipulative. He might find a way to explain everything away or convince Sarah that I was jealous or mistaken. I needed proof, and I needed to protect all the women he was hurting. The next morning I made a decision that terrified me. I was going to confront each of Derek's victims and show them the truth about what was happening. I started with Jessica because her situation seemed the most advanced. I asked her to meet me for coffee under the pretense of discussing bachelor party logistics. When we sat down, I could see she was nervous and distracted. "Jessica," I said carefully, "I need to ask you something and I hope you'll be honest with me. Are you having a relationship with Derek?" Her face went completely white. She started to deny it. But I pulled out my phone and showed her photos I had taken of Derek's laptop screen during my brief glimpse at his email. The bachelor party scorecard was displayed clearly, with her name marked as conquered and rated for difficulty. There were detailed notes about their encounters and crude comments from Derek's friends about her appearance and performance. Jessica stared at the phone screen for a long time before she started crying. She admitted that Derek had been pursuing her for months, telling her that his relationship with Sarah was just for appearances because of family pressure. He claimed he had been planning to break up with Sarah after the wedding to avoid disappointing everyone, and that Jessica was his true love. I showed her the entries for Amanda and Victoria, and watched her realize that she wasn't special to Derek at all. She was just another conquest in his game. Then I told her about Sarah's entry, how Derek had described his fiancé as boring and good for cover. Jessica cried harder when she realized how Sarah was being manipulated too. My conversation with Amanda went similarly. She broke down when she saw the evidence and revealed that Derek had been telling her that Sarah was cold and distant, that he was only going through with the wedding because he had already proposed and didn't want to hurt her. He made Amanda believe that she was helping Derek find happiness, while being compassionate toward Sarah's feelings. Victoria's reaction was different. As a wedding planner, she was more businesslike about relationships, but she was furious when she realized Derek had been using her professional services as cover for his affairs. He had been booking hotel suites for wedding planning meetings that were actually used for romantic encounters. She was especially angry because her reputation could be damaged if anyone discovered she had been sleeping with a client. All 3 women were devastated, but they were also angry. Derek had lied to each of them, manipulated their emotions, and put their relationships and reputations at risk. They wanted revenge as much as they wanted to protect Sarah. We spent 2 days planning what to do. Initially, I thought we should just tell Sarah privately and let her decide how to handle the situation. But Jessica pointed out that Derek was master manipulator who might convince Sarah that we were all lying or jealous. We needed to present evidence in a way that couldn't be disputed or explained away. That's when Victoria suggested we reveal everything during the rehearsal dinner. All the families would be present. Derek wouldn't be able to escape or control the narrative, and Sarah would have immediate support from people who loved her. The plan was terrifying but perfect. We would present the evidence systematically, so Derek couldn't deny or minimize what he had done. Jessica would share the laptop screenshots showing the scorecard and group chat. Amanda would reveal Derek's lies about Sarah being cold and distant. Victoria would explain how Derek had been using business meetings as cover for affairs and had even requested access to the honeymoon suite for his personal use before the wedding. The week leading up to the rehearsal dinner was the longest of my life. I had to act normal around Derek and Sarah while knowing what was coming. Derek seemed completely confident and relaxed, joking with family members and playing the role of the perfect fiancé. Several times I caught him checking his phone and smiling in ways that made my skin crawl. Sarah was stressed but happy, making last-minute adjustments and talking about how excited she was to finally marry the love of her life. Every conversation with her felt like a knife in my chest, because I knew her world was about to be destroyed. The day of the rehearsal dinner arrived. We were at a beautiful restaurant overlooking the Tuscan countryside, with both families dressed up and celebrating what they thought would be Sarah's last night as a single woman. Derek gave a speech about how grateful he was to be joining our family and how much he loved Sarah. Everyone applauded and raised their glasses. That's when I stood up and asked for everyone's attention, said there was something important that needed to be addressed before we moved forward with the wedding. Derek looked confused, but not particularly worried. Sarah smiled at me expectantly, probably thinking I was going to share some sweet childhood memory or funny story. Instead, I announced that Derek had been having affairs with multiple women in the wedding party, and that we had evidence to prove it. The restaurant went completely silent. You could hear glasses being set down and chairs creaking as people shifted in their seats. Derek's face changed from confusion to panic to anger in the span of about 3 seconds. He immediately started denying everything and accusing me of being jealous or unstable. But Jessica was already standing up with her phone in her hand. She projected Derek's bachelor party scorecard onto the restaurant's presentation screen that was set up for toasts. Everyone could see the crude ratings, the detailed notes about sexual encounters, and the group chat messages where Derek and his friends had been betting money on his success with different women. Sarah's face went completely white as she read her own. Description is boring and good for cover. Uncle Tony started cursing in Italian. Derek's own mother gasped and covered her mouth in horror. Amanda stood up next and shared screenshots of text messages where Derek had complained about Sarah being cold and distant, claiming he was only going through with the wedding to avoid disappointing their families. The messages showed Derek telling Amanda that she was his real love and that they would be together after he figured out how to handle the Sarah situation. Victoria's presentation was the final nail in the coffin. She showed receipts for hotel suites that Derek had booked under the guise of wedding planning meetings, including detailed notes about how he wanted to use the honeymoon suite for a romantic evening with someone other than Sarah before the actual wedding night. By this point, Derek had stopped trying to deny what was happening and was instead attempting to minimize the damage. He claimed it was just cold feet and that he really did love Sarah. He begged for forgiveness and promised to change. But the evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Sarah stood up slowly, looking at Derek like she was seeing him for the first time. "You rated me," she said quietly. "You literally gave me a score like I was some kind of product you were reviewing. And you told your friends I was boring." Derek tried to approach her, but Uncle Tony and my father both stepped between them. The entire restaurant was watching this family drama unfold, but I didn't care about the public scene anymore. Sarah needed to know the truth, and she needed the support of everyone who loved her. Sarah took off her engagement ring and threw it at Derek's feet. She announced that the wedding was canceled, effective immediately. Then she walked out of the restaurant with her head held high, surrounded by family members who were ready to support her through whatever came next. Derek tried to follow her, still making excuses and promises. But Jessica blocked his path and told him that if he didn't leave immediately, she would call the police and report him for harassment. Amanda and Victoria stood beside her, united in their anger toward the man who had manipulated all of them. Derek finally realized that his charming personality wasn't going to save him this time. He grabbed his jacket and stormed out of the restaurant, muttering threats about lawsuits and claiming that we had all conspired against him. The aftermath was complicated but ultimately positive. Sarah was devastated for about 2 weeks, cycling through anger, sadness, and relief. She moved back in with her parents temporarily while she figured out her next steps. The family rallied around her with an outpouring of love and support that reminded me why I'm so proud to be part of this crazy Italian clan. The financial situation was challenging but manageable. We couldn't recover most of the wedding deposits, but Uncle Tony hired a lawyer who found ways to pursue Derek for some of the costs. Derek had been using company funds for some of his travel and hotel expenses, which created legal problems for him with his employer. His pharmaceutical company fired him after conducting their own investigation into his expense reports. Jessica broke up with Tom, realizing that her relationship with Derek had revealed problems in her own engagement that needed to be addressed. She's been in therapy and seems to be doing much better. She and Sarah have been working on rebuilding their friendship, which was damaged by Derek's manipulation, but wasn't completely destroyed. Amanda and I went through a rough patch because she felt guilty about the whole situation. But we worked through it with some couples counseling. She helped me understand how Derek had been exploiting insecurities and emotions that she didn't even realize she had. Our relationship is actually stronger now because we've learned to communicate more openly about difficult topics. Victoria provided testimonials for the legal case against Derek and helped us document his fraudulent use of business meetings. Her professional reputation wasn't damaged because everyone could see that she was a victim of Derek's deception, rather than a willing participant in any wrongdoing. Derek tried to contact Sarah several times in the months after the canceled wedding, alternating between apologies and accusations. Uncle Tony finally had to get a restraining order to make him stop. We heard through mutual connections that Derek moved to another state and took a lower-paying job with a different company. His group chat with his college buddies was leaked on social media, which didn't help his reputation in pharmaceutical sales circles. The most surprising outcome was how much stronger our family became through this crisis. Everyone pulled together to support Sarah, and we learned that we could handle anything as long as we faced it together. Sarah eventually decided to go back to school for her master's degree in graphic design, something she had always wanted to do but never had the opportunity to pursue. 6 months later, Sarah thanked me for having the courage to speak up, even though it meant destroying her wedding plans. She said that learning the truth about Derek before marrying him had probably saved her from years of unhappiness and betrayal. She also said she was grateful to have learned who her real friends were and how much her family loved her. Looking back, I'm proud of the decision I made, even though it was terrifying at the time. I realized that sometimes protecting someone you love means being willing to deliver devastating news. If I had stayed silent, Sarah would have married Derek and eventually discovered his infidelity anyway. But by then she would have been legally and financially tied to him in ways that would have made the situation much more complicated. I also learned that people like Derek count on other people's reluctance to get involved or cause scenes. He was able to manipulate multiple women simultaneously because he assumed that none of them would compare notes or speak up about what was happening. When we worked together to expose him, his whole system of lies collapsed immediately. Sarah is dating someone new now, a guy she met in graduate school who treats her with respect and genuine affection. She's planning a small, simple wedding for next year, and she asked me to be her man of honor this time. She jokes that my investigative skills make me better qualified to screen potential husbands than most people. The whole experience taught me that being a good friend or family member sometimes means doing really difficult things. It would have been easier to stay quiet and hope that Derek's behavior would somehow improve, but that would have been cowardly and selfish. Sarah deserved to know the truth about the man she was planning to spend her life with, and the other women deserved to know they were being used and manipulated. I'm grateful that everything worked out as well as it did, but I'm also aware that we were lucky. Derek could have been more vindictive or dangerous. The legal and financial consequences could have been worse. Sarah could have blamed me for destroying her wedding instead of thanking me for saving her from a bad marriage. But I think the key factor was that we presented the evidence together as a united group of people who cared about Sarah and wanted to protect her. Derek couldn't dismiss all of us as jealous or unstable, and he couldn't explain away the documented proof of his behavior. The lesson I learned is that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them and act accordingly. Derek's treatment of Sarah and the other women revealed his true character. And once we had that information, we had a responsibility to act on it. I never want to be in a situation like that again. But if I am, I know I'll have the courage to do the right thing, even when it's scary and complicated. That's what family is for, supporting each other through the worst situations and celebrating together when justice prevails. Sarah is happy now, living her authentic life without Derek's manipulation and lies. That makes all the drama and difficulty worthwhile. Sometimes destroying something toxic is the most loving thing you can do.